Boo of Envil Films back with another video, and today I'm going to be talking about the Sigma 28 to 45 f1.8 zoom lens once again. And this is a very random video, and it was not something that I planned to do at all, but I think I really want to discuss in depth, and I think it does warrant its own video because at the end of the day, this lens was not sent to me from Sigma for review or anything like that. I bought this lens and I've used this lens for 2 wedding shoots, and I literally just posted 2 hours ago my review on this lens based off of my real world use using it to film 2 weddings, handheld, on gimbal, all that stuff. And I think it's my responsibility as a reviewer to go through some of these specifics of why you, the viewer, would want to buy this lens or skip it. And so I think there's 3 things about this lens that you would want to check off. The image quality with this lens, the sharpness, the bokeh, all that stuff, I think it looks fantastic, so it checks off that box. The other 2 boxes is where it's questionable. It is borderline 2 pounds, and the 2 pounds is fine for me after shooting those 2 weddings. I feel like handheld and on gimbal, I think it is manageable. So it checks that box for me as well. The other box is its versatility with the zoom range, 28 to 45. And obviously the f1.8 is fantastic, so we don't have to go there. 28 to 45. Like, how useful is that range? And, as soon as I posted the video, one of the most common comments I get is like, that 28 to 45 is not enough. A lot of people say, you could just shoot a 35 prime and be able to satisfy the needs of the 28 to 45 range. All you need is a 35. And I'm not gonna lie to you, before I decided to buy this lens, I was thinking the same thing. I have a 35mm G Master f1.4. I have a 35mm f1.8. Why don't I just use that lens? And as I was going through the thought process of whether or not I was gonna buy this 28 to 45 or not, I was like, why don't I just use 35? And then the answer was clear. The 35 is just too wide for me to confidently use all day because I tend to like to be at 50 millimeters most of the day. That's why I used to film weddings mostly with 50 millimeter prime lenses until I realized there's moments where I wanted to get a wide shot really quickly here and there, and I really appreciated the ability to go to like a 24 or 35 millimeter really quickly, sacrifice that prime aperture of like f1.4, f1.8, and do f2.8, but be able to get like these really nice wider angle shots as I was going throughout the day. And 35 millimeter is great. I'm not saying I can't pull it off and just film 35 all day. I'm sure I'll do fine. There would be a lot of shots where I prefer to either be tighter or wider if I did use a 35 millimeter. And in my opinion, I think the 28 to 45 satisfies those needs, and I'm going to go through it as quick as I can, as detailed as I can in this video. So just going through some wedding footage here. If I go back to this prep here with the bride, okay, there's going to be a lot of shots where I'm going to stay around 45 and I'm going to go to 35 for various reasons. 45, obviously, I'm going to get that tighter portrait shot. And then 35 if I just want to step back a little bit. And in this particular room, there's not that much space. So a lot of the shots, I'm literally having my back against, like, I don't remember if it was a wall or a cabinet or something. So there's not much room for me to move back. And then I want to get a wider shot of the bride's entire dress up, top to bottom. Again, very small room. And here, it would probably be nice if I had a 24 millimeter, but of course, I just go to 28. I'm able to, for the most part, get like a full body shot of the bride. With a little bit of movement here, I was able to do it. With a 35, likely a no-go. Obviously, I can't do that with a 45. So within this just prep scene, I already used the entire focal range of the lens. And then later, the bride had like a first look with her bridesmaids, and I wanted to get a shot of her walking out of the building, the house. And so I used a 45 millimeter. I got a close up shot of the bride as she was walking out of the house. And then I wanted to really quickly get the entire shot of both the bride and her bridesmaids in the shot. So, of course, I went to 28 millimeter. Of course, I could have backed up here. Maybe if I only had like a 45 millimeter, if I only had a 35 or 45 millimeter prime, I probably could have just backed up and got the shot for the most part. But it was just so much easier to just go to 28. And of course, there was a photographer behind me as well, so I'm not trying to like bump into them. So the fact that I was able to just like take a step back, go to 28 millimeter, get the shot of both the bride and her bridesmaids, and it helped me tell the story better, in my opinion. And of course, my second shooter, Say Park, he had the other angle where I was just facing, where his lens was just pointing at the bridesmaids themselves to get their reaction. So with this lens going from 45 to 28, I was able to get two different shots to help me tell the story. And then, of course, the situation like the ceremony, obviously, I got 28 millimeters. The 28 millimeters, I am able to get a wide shot of the guests sitting down, waiting for things to happen. And 28 millimeters here is the difference between me being able to get a lot more movement, this push-in movement through the arch, versus 35 millimeter, where I would not be able to do this. I probably had to back up a lot further, and the movement is not as dramatic. So when it comes to like photography, maybe there's not as much difference between like 28, 35, 45. But for video, in terms of the movement factor, the wider you get, the more movement you get out of the shot. So in this case, 28 millimeter came in clutch. And then, of course, later when they're doing like their first kiss and then they start walking down the aisle together, I had it in 45. Now, through experience, a lot of times when I was in a 50 millimeter, it was tough for me to get a shot if they decided to kiss and dip with the 50. That means I would have to continue to back up, and sometimes there could be another photographer behind me, the photographer next to me. I usually try to stay shoulder to shoulder with the photographer here. So it was great, the fact that I was able to be at 45. And then because I knew they're probably going to do a dip kiss or something like that, I zoomed out to 35 real quick, the scene, and I was able to get that wider shot. Again, big difference in my opinion between 45 and 35, even though at first glance it is only about a foot of a difference in terms of where you're standing, but the overall shot of a 45 is different than a 35 if you moved up with the 35 to get like a similar focal length as the 45, because 35 is still technically a wide angle focal length, and what it does to the image, what it does to the subject you're focused on, makes a vastly different shot than what a 45 millimeter does, because 45 millimeter is pretty much a standard focal range. So just like in this case here with the bride throwing her bouquet, I believe I had at 45 f1.8 obviously, and I was able to get this nice shot, this nice compression, this nice squared off look with the 45 millimeter. Now with a 35 millimeter, I would not have been able to get this exact shot. It would have looked a lot different if I was on 35 and I moved closer to get like a similar field of view, but the 35 would show a lot more of the background. The compression would be a lot less. The overall blurriness of the women in the back would be completely different. So, you know, as much as you would sit there and say, hey, look, like, you know, the 24, you would say 28 to 45 is not that big of a range, but in a use case like run and gun filmmaking, there's a lot of things that you can do, you know, with a 28 to 45 range that, let's say, getting a 35 millimeter prime to just be in the middle of those two is not going to cut it. I'm not sure about photography. I'm not really a run and gun photographer who does that kind of thing, but in terms of videography, 28 to 45, having that range, especially now that I've actually done some real world use, real world run and gun shooting with it, it makes a huge difference. In my opinion, if you're looking at the Sony E-mount 28 to 45 millimeter f1.8 for either Sony or Panasonic here, and you are a 35 millimeter shooter, a 50 millimeter prime shooter, and you just wanted some additional range without sacrificing your aperture, going from like f1.8 to like 2.8 or something, so like I highly recommend this lens. I think it's a mistake to think that just using a 35 millimeter prime would give you the same use and the same results as having a 28 to 45. I think if Sigma would have been able to push this lens and go from at least 28 to 50, it will probably look better optically when you're seeing, the range of the zoom. But 45 is very, very close to being a 50. Literally you go on Sony, you go from standard to active stab, and that 45 becomes 49.5. So it's pretty much a 50 millimeter range. So anyways, I hope this is the last, I think this is the last video I'm going to do on the Sigma 28 to 45. And I hope the 3 videos now that I've done on this lens will help you make a purchase decision on this lens or not. I think if you're on Sony E-mount, if you're on Panasonic L-mount or whatever, and you're a videographer, I think it'll be very worthwhile to Sigma 28 to 45 f1.8. And again, I bought this lens with my own money. I'm not working with Sigma. I am not associated with Sigma in any way. I'm telling you this as not a YouTube D-bag trash, but from videographer to videographer, this lens is very useful, and I think it is a lens that most videographers out there should have in their kit, simply because, dude, this is zoom, it's f1.8 constant, and 28 to 45 is actually a very useful range. Is it perfect? No. But is it useful? Absolutely. Until next time, lighten up.
Hey man, what lens is that?
This is a Sony 24 to 50 f2.8 G lens.
Oh my god, that lens is trash.
Why is that?
It's f2.8 made in Vietnam. Trash. If you want to be the best, if you want to be professional, if you want to be award-winning, you need to use the BBC-L.
What are you talking about, BBC?
Let me show you. Oh my god, big black camera lens. Sigma 2845 f1.8.
I don't know if my old ass Asian backs can be able to carry around that weight all day.
You go to B&H, they take care of you.
B&H Photo? Aren't they closed for Jewish holiday?
No man. B&H Bit and Hole Phở Nail and Massage. By phở number 1 Lakshai with happy ending massage. Only $29.99.